Hello and a very warm welcome to Political Economy with Shweta Punj. This week we are looking at the startup ecosystem in India. Startups of India have made global headlines. They have placed India on the map of innovation. Entrepreneurship has emerged for many now as the first career option, something that was unheard of or unthinkable even a decade ago. We've seen a phenomenal change, a boom of sorts, especially in the last 5 to 7 years. Whether it's edtech, whether it's fintech, whether it is e-commerce, a lot of our lives are being run by disruptive ideas that have been driven by young entrepreneurs. However, in the last 2 years or so, we've seen that the startup universe has also gone through a funding winter. There have been challenges that have emerged in terms of governance in this space. And while India has made tall strides in putting its startups on the forefront, it is still much behind when it comes to other countries, especially whether it's the United States or even Israel for that matter. So while we've made a lot of progress, but there is a lot more that needs to be done, especially for a nation of our size and our population. To understand in greater detail on what does India need to do to further nurture and to further build value in the Indian startup ecosystem, I have with me someone who has been deeply engaged in nurturing startups, Ms. Padmaja Ruparel, the co-founder of the Indian Angel Network. Ms. Ruparel, many thanks for joining us.
First of all, thank you for having me here, Shweta. Appreciate it. You're absolutely right. I think India's startup ecosystem is only going north. It will have its blips and like any other industry, but overall it's going north. And I must say that the last decade has been very different to many decades before that. We used to knock on doors in the power lobbies and then they didn't open. Today we are invited to get in and give our views. So that's the very, very 180-degree difference that we are seeing. I think you're right. We saw kind of euphoria after pandemic 2020, 2021, where a lot of online plays, a lot of market share models, most of these companies didn't do well as we sort of settled down in 2022, 23. I see what you're saying and I understand that. And it's unfortunate because I think as you scale, I think keeping an eye on the ground is very, very important, which is on governance, on audits, on all of those issues. But between 2022 and 2023, Shweta, the reality is that funding was not easy, right? It was only about 75%, 25% funding that was really raised. And honestly, women entrepreneurs suffered even more. But as I look at 2024, more or less from April, May, I think it's only going up. We are very, very, in a very aggressive way, we are seeing some FOMO situations in certain sectors. We are seeing very interesting startups that are emerging across sectors, for instance, like space tech and cyber security, hardware electronics, semiconductor, biotech, beyond healthcare applications like med devices, precision medicine. So I think we are moving into to the next paradigm shift of startups. And this, to my mind, because they are solving real problems. Healthcare is a real problem. Space is not only strategic, but has huge applications across different sectors. If you look at cyber as we are going digital, we are the fastest growing digital economy, and that has its problems of cyber. To my mind, we are now moving into the next level of startup innovation, which is solving real problems. And interestingly, there is a lot of learning from 2022 that we are seeing, that there is not only an eye on the top line, but also on the bottom line. So to my mind, funding will improve, growth will improve. We are an island almost globally, if I leave out China, where the economy is going up. So we have everything going right for us right now.
Fascinating. I love the optimism, Ms. Ruparel, in that, and I'm sure that's music the entrepreneurs who are watching us. So you mentioned that 2022 was a particularly rough year for women and overall, and that followed into 2023 as well. But you are optimistic about 2024. Have we seen an uptick, a substantial uptick in terms of funding that's coming into the startup universe? And is the funding winter behind us? Are we going to see a very different winter this time around for startups?
So, Shweta, in my personal belief, I don't think India ever saw a winter. It saw a slowdown in funding, which is very different to winter in funding. But today, when I look at, are investing, right? We're investing heavily. I think on Friday we did a deal, and we are actually have a healthy problem of co-investors. Everybody wanting to co-invest with us, right? And we are oversubscribed. That gives you a very, very, very clear example that money is available. Domestic money is available, which is very important for young startups. So to my mind, good propositions, solving real problems, having a top line, bottom line, has the scale and has what I would call really good, high quality entrepreneurs leading it. I think money is available. Today, and you've seen it in in the budget, right? There's so many ways that they have incentivized. The 1,000 crore space fund itself is something which is an example, which is encouraging a lot of private investors to invest. So I think the right signals have been given. Entrepreneurs have learned from failures that they were in the ecosystem earlier. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. And if you look at the IPO segment, you're seeing almost 60 to 65% of the IPOs that are companies that are going public, they have VC or private equity money, which is very different to what used to happen in the past. So yes, we may still have our blips, we'll go up and down, but the overall trend is going north.
Okay, so let's look at the policy aspect, Ms. Ruparel. We've seen Startup India. We've seen a concerted push from the government, from a policy perspective, to build an ecosystem for startups. But now, from here on, and this I want to take off from the conversation we had earlier, a few weeks ago when we were talking, and you said that earlier startups were very focused on domestic issues, and now they're looking at even solving international problems, right? So from a policy perspective, where are we lacking at the moment? Because Startup India has been a fantastic initiative, but now to move into the fourth gear, as it were, I would imagine that we will have to, lift our policies to enable the startup ecosystem further.
No, you're right. I think you're absolutely right. We've done what we needed to breed startups, to breed very high quality entrepreneurs, to bring going entrepreneurial as a first choice, career choice, right? But we have to move into several things. Number one, I think for very deep tech companies like biotech, manufacturing tech, all of these, AI, Gen AI, what we are finding is a number of these companies are getting attracted by overseas investors. Those markets are much, much better than ours. So we have to sort these things out. And to sort these things out, I would say a few things which need to be surely done. One is we need growth money for such sectors in India. We don't have them. If we don't create those pools of capital, then I'm afraid founders will have to keep building their companies. They will attract overseas money, and overseas investors will want their companies to flip to those countries. And we'll lose the IP that we have created. We have risked it at an early stage. And when it's time to harvest, somebody else will harvest it. So I think growth capital for such sectors becomes extremely important. Second, I think, is the fact that ESOP is so critical for startups. Startups don't have money. The only currency they have is shares, right? So to attract very high quality, global level, world-class talent, they use ESOPs. Now, our ESOP policy is not the best. So there is a whole opportunity for us to clean that up and ensure talent, first of all, gets retained in the country. Second, companies grow with that talent here. And third, that new talent looks at startups as a very lucrative opportunity to grow. Everybody is not going to become an entrepreneur. There'll be many who will work with startups, and that's also very important to build those teams. Third, I think that if you look at sectors like med devices or biotech, there is a whole piece that is the regulatory piece on FDA, on CEA that's required. Today, we do not have an equivalent of that in this country. We need to develop that, right? It's very, very clear that our founders are building something not only which is innovative, solving real problems, but at a price that India and developing other countries other than the US or the Europe are able to afford it, and we have that opportunity to grab those markets. But yes, we need a regulator here, to approval. Otherwise, we will be in a queue, which will take forever. So these are some of the issues. I think the fourth issue is it's very important to see how liquidity is enabled for investors. Many of these deep tech sectors, they take a long time. It's a long gestation period. Like, look at companies in space tech. 10 years is nothing for a company to start going revenue earning, right? ISRO has opened up, IDEX has opened up, InSpace has opened up, DRDO has opened up. But all of these sectors take time. Biotech takes time, right? How are they going to? Investors are willing to invest, but they need to see exits. So we need to create an ecosystem where investors can liquidate, right? So there is a lot to be done in terms of, and there are a lot of regulatory issues, there are a lot of funding issues, there are some policy issues that we need to change. Currently, for example, I'll give you a very small example which can be changed immediately. Today, a startup is defined that it's no more than 10 years old from the date of incorporation, right? For a space tech or a biotech company, 10 years is nothing. They're not going to get anywhere. They can't take the benefits. Why can't we extend it to 20 years, for example? Right? The other is that a startup cannot raise more than 10 crores through an angel fund. An angel fund is a good structure. Why limit it to 10 crores? Why not take it to 50 crores? Because a space tech startup will need 35, 40, 50 crore kind of money to get it going. And we have enough examples that will showcase this, right? Biotech companies need huge amount of money. So they sort of lose out on tapping domestic HNI money, which is, backed by KYCs, registered with AIF structure through the angel fund. The companies are not being able to leverage that. So, making these small tweaks will actually open up a lot of things. So there are 3 levels, if you understand what I'm saying.
Right, absolutely. So, we have another budget now that will come in a few months, and the last few budgets have been very eventful for the startup universe. We saw the angel tax, which I know that Indian Angel Network has lobbied very hard for it to be taken back. So what is the thought process that goes behind such moves, because, and I'm sure in your interactions with the government, they must have given you some sort of logic to this. So, for anybody who's interested in this space, and for anyone who's, invested in this space, what would you like to say, Ms. Ruparel, on such measures for the policymakers who might be watching this interview? That what do they need to be mindful of when they're thinking of introducing a new tax, for instance, or in their view, or trying to, enable an entrepreneur through a taxation tweak?
So, first of all, I want to sort of leverage your platform to say thank you to the government. I mean, it was a very bold step to abolish a tax. We've never seen that happen. So, really, really record my appreciation. It's a bold move, right? But it also tells you that the angel tax, which was born 12 years ago under the previous regime, right, was a senseless tax, right? You're basically trying to go after certain people who were misusing the structure, and everybody got sort of swiped in that. So one clear learning from that is, if you need to chase somebody down who's not doing things right, please chase them down. Even if it is looking for a needle in a haystack, don't kill the ecosystem, which angel tax almost did, number one. Number two, I think it came to a head when foreign investors investing in angel deals also got impacted, which came in much later, right? The second learning is if somebody else is putting money in at a very early stage risk, very risky stage, please enable it. To say it in Hindi, किसी और के पैसे से हम risk लेते हैं, तो why not, right? Let's build our IP on that. To keep some very common sense issues on mind. Third, I think that is why I think this government has the ability to tweak and enable things much better. That's the learning. To be able to abolish a tax, I think everything else that we are asking for is a much lower level of asks that we have. There's no abolishment we are asking for. So to me, those are the big learnings that come. But the flip learning also is that the government now expects the ecosystem, be it investors or entrepreneurs, to be well governed, right? To be doing the right things, to be ensuring you're legal, you're compliant, etc. And I would say in the same breath that as much as we ask of the government, I think we also need to ask of ourselves to ensure all of this happens. So when we want to go to the government and we talk to them, and at least when we lobby with them, I think there is a whole onus that we take through, right? We are sort of taking on a lot of things where we are talking to the SEBI to say we will self-regulate ourselves, right? We are pushing to get DMAT done, right? These are all transparency, compliance, regulatory, good behavior kind of things. So I think we are moving into a phase where the investing industry and the regulators are getting into a kind of a partnership level, because as much as you bolster the confidence of the government and regulators that you're going to do the right thing, it encourages them to make the right moves also. So I would just say the investing industry and the regulators are partnering. We want all the entrepreneurs also to follow the same path in some ways. And I think that to me is very important.
Okay.
It's not enough to ask. It's also necessary to deliver, because only then can the government do what is required.
Absolutely. I also wanted to get your views on the US presidential elections. How do you see President Trump impacting the Indian startup ecosystem? Do you see funding getting dried up? And I remember in our conversation, you mentioned that Americans are very protective about their space, where entrepreneurship is also concerned. While Indian entrepreneurs are looking at entering into several markets, US is guarding their space a lot. So do you see that aggravating further now? And you could in fact explain that for our viewers also. I've alluded to our conversation that we've had earlier, but let's,
Yeah, I think if you look at one acronym that President-elect Trump has been talking about right through his election is MAGA, right? Make America Great Again. So it is quite, and he is rightist, right? So to a great extent, they will want to make sure that they are creating IP value technology for America first, right? But the reality for India is also something else, right? India has proven itself as a digital economy, right? It's built technologies. It's a huge market. We cannot be ignored, both in terms of demography, in terms of our GDP growth, etc. So to my mind, we will have a tough time. Our entrepreneurs are not necessarily going to have an easier time. But I think that there is a whole host of companies in the US will want to sort of tap into India. Look at just one sector, just as an example. US is focused on clean tech, right? How many companies will be able to ignore 1/7 of the world's population on the one hand? That's one big piece. I think the other piece that is becoming very interesting is how are we going to be able to leverage the leaders of the two nations? They have a kind of relationship which will enable more of conversation. But my worry is, will we see a lot of technology transfers happening, or will we only be able to see technology accessing markets? They are two different things. And therefore, there is an opportunity for a lot of our Indian tech entrepreneurs, or even for that matter, other entrepreneurs, to access global markets. I mean, there are companies we have whose only one line GTM, go to market strategy, is not to go to the US, not to go to North America. So I think there are those issues that will play out. But you're right. I think we may have to have a slightly tweaked strategy how we work with the US, to be honest. But you look at Musk on SpaceX, there's a huge opportunity in India. I mean, Starlink, huge opportunity. We have a lot of pockets in the country like the Northeast, which are unconnected. Isn't that an opportunity for connecting the unconnected?
So
but
that could
how it
spur
works out
entrepreneurship.
is
Sorry to interrupt.
that could spur entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So since you mentioned Starlink,
Yes.
and that could, really open up communication and connectivity. So are you saying that these things could work in tandem? Like somebody, like if Elon Musk was to, bring Starlink to India, that could spur or that could enable entrepreneurs working in the space? So it's not like one versus the
Yes.
other, but it could work. They could work in collaboration.
It could work. I mean, we'll see. Yes, you're right. Starlink is basically providing you an infrastructure, quote unquote, right? A telecom infrastructure. But as we have seen in the country, on that telecom infrastructure, on that internet infrastructure, look what has happened. The country is completely exploded in terms of the kind of entrepreneurs that we've seen, the propositions we've seen. And Starlink will do that if that should happen. But there are opportunities. I don't know if it will happen or not, but there are clear opportunities that can be leveraged. I mean, a lot of our companies are still working with the majors of the US, right? Be it with Lockheed Martin or companies like that. They're not going to go away, dissipate. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to dissipate. Business still, America does have a thesis in life, which is fundamental. Business first. That's not going to go away. It's not going to be driven by other things.
Right.
I mean,
so your optimism remains.
Just the fact that, we'll have to see how it works out.
Any specific sectors that you think could benefit, and any specific sectors that you feel could really take a hit with this? Like, for instance, I'll just give you an example of in India. If you see, the digital space has been dominated by the likes of Google and so on, and domestic players have been pushing back. As a counter to Twitter, we saw coup coming up, but coup could not really survive. So do you see, India also pushing for its homegrown entrepreneurs to become bigger and better in this whole tariff wars that we are expecting, that will come about once President-elect Donald Trump takes charge? Or do you see greater collaboration emerging from this? And just want to get a sense, because Indian startups have been saying that they need to be protected, they need to be nurtured. They do give the example of China as well. So do you see more policies that need to be geared towards protecting the Indian startup ecosystem as the US lobby gets stronger to, get into the Indian market more aggressively?
So let me respond to that in two ways, right? Number one is, let's see if the tariff, how strict the tariff framework comes in. Let's first see that coming. It hasn't been announced yet, right? And some changes, especially in larger companies, will happen. I don't deny that. But I think more than protection is what I was referring to earlier. If you start protecting, then it's not going to allow companies to innovate that much. You are sort of then working also in that protected framework, right? So to my mind, there's a huge need to make India, if you want Indian startups to become strong, to really build the depth and width for them to first become big here, right? Operationalize, scale here, and then take it to other countries. So I think more than even America, I think it's important that we have larger growth pools of growth money. We have what I said, all of what I said earlier, enable talent to high quality talent. We shouldn't be looking at talent in Dubai and US, etc. Why? We have great talent here, but we have to enable it to be used. ESOPs have to come through, valuations have to be better managed, liquidity for investors has to come in, M&A has to grow. There are a lot of small sections that you will see in companies law, for example, right? When a larger company acquires a smaller company, it loses all the losses to enable the tax benefits that the acquired company has accrued over the losses, right? Through the losses. Those kind of things will enable this ecosystem to grow, irrespective of what America does. And unless we create that ecosystem where entrepreneurs grow here, they stay here, they create value, the IP grows here, they are able to grow to a certain extent. Yes, but if you are waiting for money from the US to come or from any other country for that matter to come, then yes, you are getting into the situations that you mentioned. What are the relationships between the two countries?
Right.
So I think to some extent, we've created, if I may use this word in a very thin way, self-reliant startup ecosystem, right? We've not depended on startups from other countries. I think we need to create an ecosystem where our companies can grow here in a self-reliant manner. And that is why I think growth money is extremely important. Today, there is no money. If you want 200, 300, 400 kind of crores for a biotech company, we're struggling. We are looking to the US. FDA, we are looking to the US. And it's very natural that we'll be queued up behind the American companies. It's very natural. We would do the same, perhaps, right? Just common sense. We need those ecosystems. We need those regulators. We need all of that.
Absolutely. So you're saying
it's worth a walk to see what happens in the FDA ecosystem, how aggressive they are and how deep they are. Both.
So you're saying the more glamorous sectors are the ones that are getting more funding. E-commerce, anything to do with tech is what is getting more funding, and the more innovation and the more science and science-driven sectors you're suggesting they're not getting enough funding, and that's why
as of now, yes,
these sectors are having to look abroad, towards the West. I also want to talk to you about the role of the
and I want to add
sector.
one more thing. Those sectors were not even opened up 3 or 4 years ago. So there's a huge change already that has happened. We must recognize that, right?
Sure.
If they had not moved into the startup stage and they were reliant on, they were sort of relegated to the research stage, just to give you a difference, then we wouldn't be talking what we are talking today. But our entrepreneurs have proven that they're doing something innovative, they're solving problems, they're driven by science and technology. So there's a huge opportunity.
Okay, I also want to talk to you about the role of the corporate sector. When it comes to funding, when it comes to maybe looking at collaboration with startups that are innovating, because in a big legacy of the future, or do you see that happening in India where corporates are, aligning with startups, building, helping them innovate because it serves a purpose for the company as well?
Yeah, in a very thin way, I would say it's just started. Let me put it that way. To say that they are sort of starting to is a very seminal word here, to seed young startups, helping them build their technologies, opening up their tech expertise, allowing them to pilot in their ecosystems, actually sharing with them what their problems are. But after that, what? Right? Corporates, very few corporates have corporate venture funds, to be honest. So after that, what becomes the big question? And to my mind, it's great. I mean, that was not happening earlier. It's starting to happen now. But if you look at the US, again, and it's an example because it is the mecca of entrepreneurship, to be honest, right? The country is. So there is a lot of corporate investment happening. There's a lot of M&A. There's a lot of IP acquisition happening. And that is, it wasn't happening, let's say, 10, 12 years ago. It's starting to happen, but it needs to sort of accelerate because it will help to also innovate the corporates in some ways. They will have new models, they'll have new technologies to work with. But that is not yet at the same pace that one would have
Interesting. All right. Your closing comments, Ms. Ruparel, on young entrepreneurs who are looking at raising some money in 2025. What would be your advice to them? And what does the Indian Angel Network look at when you decide to support an entrepreneur or support an idea?
So I would tell entrepreneurs today, there are enough problems in this country that needs to be solved. And if you can have an innovative solution or a disruptive solution, go for it. And believe me, what works in India will work somewhere else in the world for sure. The world does not get relegated to only the Western markets. Near East, Near West, Far East, Far West, all work. So second, there is a lot of domestic money for good companies, good founders, solving real problems, executing well. There is money in this country. You don't have to worry. You have to make sure that you're tracking, you're building well, and you're creating well. So I think please take on this challenge of actually making the change and making the change that India needs and its citizens need by solving these problems. There is a challenge out there. Pick up the baton and run. From IAN's perspective, and I would just add one more point. When you raise money, please raise money from investors who are value adds, both in terms of the kind of money they put in, the quality of money, as well as those who add or invest beyond money, time, mind space, access to networks. Please check those out. From IAN, we are looking to invest exactly what I'm saying. We've invested in companies in water, which are solving water problems. We've invested in space. We're looking to do biotech, healthcare, precision medicine, robotics, brand building. We're doing all of that. And we are investing heavily. We feel, and I think we do, we bring in very high quality people who help the companies. Governance for us is a very, very big need. We look for governance, we look for compliance, and we want that. I think what we also bring is, as we look at companies and we have to work with the policymakers to make it happen for these entrepreneurs, we're willing to roll up our sleeves and even walk those corridors. But what we really look for are, pardon my using this word, but really kick-ass entrepreneurs who can build, who can scale, who can lead and create globally competitive companies.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Ruparel, for ending this conversation on a very high note. And, I have to agree with you that startups need to think India first. And as Ms. Ruparel pointed out, that startups need to think of solving problems in India, because once you've cracked the Indian market, the global market is really, it could seem like a piece of cake, because India is a very complicated and a very diverse market. Well, with that, we'll close this conversation. But thank you so much to our viewers and to our listeners for tuning in. Also, please do send us your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. Thanks so much for joining, and thanks so much for watching us. Thank you.